Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Inclusive Consumer Feedback webinar. My name is Biljana, and I work at the Center for Cultural Diversity in Aging. Our vision is that we want all aged care consumers in Australia to experience inclusive and accessible care. And our purpose is to build the capacity and capabilities of Australian aged care providers so they can deliver services that are inclusive and accessible. Some of our service areas include and are inclusive practice training and workshops, such as the diversity webinar series that we have on a regular basis and that are also on our website. The capacity building to promote cultural inclusion and equity, such as our website resources, like the multilingual resources that we have, and practice guides. And diversity advice and consulting, which is personalized advice that we give to aged care providers and as well as government agencies. And we would like to note that we love to collaborate and contribute to good practice stories. Also, I would like to note that the Center for Cultural Diversity in Aging is supported by Benetas and funded by the Australian Department of Health via the Partners in Culturally Appropriate Care PCAC program. Now, a little bit about today's webinar agenda. Firstly, Sinisha Christoph will, from the Australian Multicultural Community Services, will talk about the inclusive consumer feedback processes and innovations. After that, our very own manager, Lisa Tribucio, will talk about the consumer voice film and key consideration in adopting inclusive feedback. And we have the special presenter, Yuki Simmons from the Parliament of Victoria, who will talk about adopting culturally inclusive processes to the Victorian parliamentary inquiry into the needs of older people from migrant and refugee backgrounds. I would like to introduce Sinisha Christoph, who is the Manager of Access and Engagement for the Australian Multicultural Community Services. He works continuously towards supporting the culturally and linguistically diverse communities and individuals to maximize their potential. And I'd like to say that he joined the Australian Multicultural Community Services in 2013 in order to advise and support seniors and other people who are facing barriers in accessing services. He has an advanced diploma in community services management, a Bachelor of Social Work and Social Policy, and a Master's of International Relations and Conflict Resolution. He also can speak Macedonian, Serbian, and Croatian. So welcome, Sinisha.
Before I start, I would like to tell you a little bit about Australian Multicultural Community Services. We are a community-based not-for-profit organisation that provides support or specialises in providing support to culturally and linguistically diverse community in Melbourne and Victoria. And we have been around as an organisation for over 37 years, providing essential support to over 35 communities and people speaking over 40 languages, 40 different languages, which illustrates how diverse our society is and why topics as inclusive consumer feedback are important for us. Myself, I started as an access and support worker. I have supported a number of communities, number of community leaders, empowered them with information, but I also had the privilege to work individually with culturally and linguistically diverse people and help them out to navigate and access different service systems. Throughout my career with Australian Multicultural Community Services, I have personally supported over 2,000 culturally and linguistically diverse people who, without that particular support and the support of people doing similar roles like mine, will be probably stay without services, in most of the cases unaware that the services or a particular service system exists. You can clearly see the standards outlined in my presentation, probably already familiarized with this illustration available on the website of the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission as well. And we can clearly see that here in the center, we have the consumer, and we need to offer the consumer dignity and choice. And this is where providers of culturally and linguistically diverse services, and also other providers as well, need to focus on how to support best people who speak different languages and who come from different cultures. In this particular presentation, we are focusing on standard number 6 of feedback and complaints. As we may be aware, the standard 6 requires an organization to have a system in place to resolve complaints, but not only. That system must be accessible, confidential, prompt, and fair. It should also support all consumers to make complaints or provide feedback. Resolving complaints within the organization can build a better relationship between the actual consumer and the organization. And with this can lead with achieving better outcomes, both for the organization and also for the consumer. Most of us who came across people and communities who speak other languages and are coming from different cultures are aware that these people do experience number of barriers in accessing services, providing feedback, navigating service systems, and so on. Some of the barriers that we have identified as an organization, there's absolutely, this list can grow and there's more than what's stated here, but the most common ones were around the language, which is understandable. We do understand that a lot of people who lived for many years in Australia do speak basic English and do understand English at least. However, express better and they do understand better when they discuss complex topics in their own native language. The culture can be a barrier as well, in addition to the language. And people who come to Australia, I like to talk about examples as well when we discuss topics as such, because there's so many examples. Let's take the European migrants who came to this country following up the Second World War. They experienced repressive regimes. They experienced wars. And when they settled in Australia, later on, that or immediately, that became a barrier in them to understanding a new system, understanding democracy, understanding their rights, and how to use the rights that they do have. Most of the culturally and linguistically diverse clients, in particular 65 plus, lack confidence and trust when they communicate with officials and service systems, and when they interact with some, inclusively when they provide particular feedback on a service or a service system. Lack of trust when sharing information, especially over the phone, and the digital literacy and skills are not at the best levels. And I think COVID-19 and the pandemic just showcased this even more, where we needed to rearrange services and organize more virtual contacts, asking people to use mobile phones and different devices like iPads. Some anecdotal data suggests that over 60% of the culturally and linguistically diverse people do not have access to the internet, or they don't have access to a device, or they do not own a device. So huge barrier. Health-related barriers, lack of support networks in place, social isolation as a barrier, and some people do hesitate to provide feedback or to lodge a complaint simply because they're too scared that they're going to lose the services or the entitlement for a particular service. And I have came across that many times, coming from many people from many cultures and speaking many languages. It's always good to talk about barriers that we have identified through our works, but what I would like to do is share a story about a gentleman that I met a couple of years ago, just to showcase how these barriers can have an impact on a particular person. We'll call this person Angel. Angel was a Macedonian-born 73 years old gentleman, and he used to live alone in a single bedroom public rental property. He has been in the past a very active member of his community, and often he was organizing support for his community here in Australia, but also overseas as well. He was very proud of his contribution that he has made in supporting his community. He has several medical conditions in place, limited mobility, and he feels socially isolated. Even though he's in great need of support, at the moment where I met him, he was not aware about a services or a service system that can organize something that can help him out to be more independent at home as well. And he was facing a number of barriers, including difficulties with English, culturally related barriers, where it was shameful for a man at his stage, at that stage of life, to seek support. So he was hesitant to reach out, and he lacked critical information regarding services and what's available for him. When he contacted our organization, we did provide language-specific support, a male worker to talk with him and identify his care needs, explain the service system and how the service system works. During the initial identification and that engagement with this client, Angel's mental health state was rapidly declining, partly due to emotional experiences after a health decline and a more due to very hopeless view of his physical functionality. He indicated that he requires support, and now he was more aware about the support available because he had the opportunity to talk to a professional who speaks his own language and explained how service systems work. And this is how services were organized. Angel's whole attitude was changed positively after those services were in place, and the actual professional from our organization assisted him and facilitated the whole process of access to services, assessments, and service provision and communication with providers as well. We also encourage Angel to provide feedback on the services that he receives, and he was very happy now to do so. He receives appropriate support physically, emotionally, and practically, and all this enabled him to gain his confidence back and improved his physical functionality to return to his day-to-day activity with the appropriate support in place. I like telling stories. This is why I wanted to share this story with you. So just we can live together this experience that he had and how much of a difference all this support, culturally and linguistically diverse support, made to this particular person. There's a number of ways how to assist all the people from culturally and linguistically diverse background to overcome these barriers that they're facing in accessing services. We need to empower consumers with information. But what we also need to do is just not wait these people to come to us, but we need to reach out to these people. We need to find them in the community. And then we need to empower them with information to make an up-to-date and informed decisions and support them to access much needed essential services. I can tell you a few examples how throughout the years we have done this. We had a stall in the middle of a shopping center. We have a mobile information van ready to go and park in a parking lot in a shopping center and reach out to people. Also provide an information session to diverse groups, like social support groups that are informal groups that are meeting, religious groups as well. We need to reach out to them and talk to them in order to empower them to make an up-to-date informed decisions about their care and be aware about a potential service that is available for them. We need to be able, as organizations, to apply a co-design approaches. Co-designs invites and encourages clients to participate in shaping a particular service. And with this, gives them the opportunity to provide a critical feedback. But also on the other side, helps the organization to learn from clients and improve their processes and services that they're delivering as well. Co-design does lead to innovation. Co-design does lead to achieving greater outcomes for all clients, including culturally and linguistically diverse people as well. We must, as organizations, give direct support to all the people to provide feedback. A trusted advocate for a CULT communities needs to be able to provide this one-on-one support, because every person is different. Every person's journey is different. And by understanding that journey, we're building a great level of trust between us, and then we can empower them and support them to provide feedback. We must engage with interpreters. Language is the most common barriers that especially 65 plus cohort is facing in accessing services. So that language specific support and engaging interpreters, it's critical in order to deliver a good service. We as an organization do employ bilingual and multilingual staff members, and we can use them. But as we know, in Australia, there's over 200 communities. So when we cannot cover all the languages with our bilingual and multilingual workers, it's always a good idea to engage an interpreter. And this is the first question that we need to ask a client who is from CULT background. Do you need an interpreter? Because in most of the cases, they're not aware that this is available. Or if they do have concerns if they need to cover financially the cost for the interpreting services, which we all know it's government funded in the industry that we work. Translate materials on your website, printouts. It does not just helps the clients to read and understand the information in their own language, but when we see translated materials in front of the office or in the hallway, like it's a welcoming message to the people from culturally and linguistically diverse background. They feel welcome, and you already by having this in place, establishing some decent level of trust, and they are expecting that they're going to be supported in line with their particular needs. As organizations, we must work together to achieve greater outcomes for our clients. That's why we do encourage partnerships and consultations with ethno-specific, but also multicultural providers as well. Specialist organizations who deal with this particular cohort as well. This helps build trust, and we must be able to build a rapport and be transparent with these clients as well. We must find a way moving forward how to significantly increase digital literacy amongst 65 plus culturally and linguistically diverse communities. As I've mentioned before, some data suggests that over 60% of the people from CULT backgrounds have limited or no access to internet or devices, and this cannot continue. Not in this century, not in the world that we're living in today, because this disadvantages culturally and linguistically diverse seniors and increases the level of social isolation, and they're already too high. So we must take as providers immediate action in regards to this and empower them. And this will also empower them to provide feedback as well, because in the world that we're living in, a lot of the to provide feedback is usually via email or via an online form as well. Support your clients on one-on-one basis, but also provide training and empower them how to do this themselves as well. It's going to make a big difference in their lives, but to organizations as well, because feedback does improve the work we do. Involve advocacy services like OPAN, In Victoria, we're lucky enough to have the access and support workers who can provide one-on-one support and advocacy services as well. But throughout Australia, we have the navigators as well. And this is an essential component of the service system. I do have concerns that over 50%, if not more, of CALD communities will not be accessing services or will not be aware about services without this particular advocacy support. And with that, they will not be able to provide feedback as well, because there will be no opportunities provided to them and they will not be empowered the way they should be to do so. We must be in constant communication with community leaders. We must involve community leaders in the service delivery, provision of feedback, so they are empowered as well. Community leaders are very critical when it comes to us accessing a particular community and trying to support them. We emphasize that everything we do, all the services that we are providing, all the feedback that is provided from the clients and is private and confidential. This is very important, and that everything we do in line with the Privacy Act. Sharing this information with clients gives them a peace of mind that whatever they say, it can remain anonymous. And they shouldn't be fearing that they're going to lose an entitlement for a particular service. To empower people in many ways, and that includes to provide feedback as well, we must do a lot of community engagement and outreach activities like information sessions, information sharing with other people, telling culturally and linguistically diverse communities and individuals that they have the right to provide feedback. And this is not something bad that they will do. Actually, this helps the provider to implement and have a better service. We can use other available services, and one of the examples that I'm giving is in this presentation. It's the practice guide completed by the Centre for Cultural Diversity of Agent, and you'll have the opportunity today to hear a bit more about it. When we work with culturally and linguistically diverse clients, it is important to know everyone's story. I've named it a case study before. I prefer to say a story because everyone has a story to tell. And why is important to know the story? It's because with the story, you know the clients as well. You know their preferences, you know their life journey, you know and get a better understanding of how they prefer to be supported. As Margaret Atwood says, at the end, we'll all become stories. And if someone knows our story, knows us. And that builds trust with culturally and linguistically diverse communities and providers. So they have established with that a trusted relationship where the clients are feeling comfortable to share feedback. We together recently organized with the Centre for Cultural Diversity in Aging a focus group where we invited a participant from 8 culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds speaking over 7 different languages. We've organized a language support, bilingual workers. We had a friendly discussion and experiences that we had with the service systems, and that all was shared. Clients provided with an opportunity to have a say in this particular case, and they didn't hesitate this time because they feel invited, they feel empowered. They had a lot to say, and we just needed to provide the opportunity and the platform where they can do so, where they can do that. We had a friendly chat over lunch and direct feedback regarding services and how services and service systems can be improved to better meet the needs of the culturally and linguistically diverse people was shared. Clients reported that they felt valued and privileged, that they are invited to the event, and they felt empowered, and they had a lot to say in regards to the system, but also the service delivery as well. They felt important and they felt included. And in the next slide, I can show that through pictures. One of the clients reported that she feels very happy because she can speak her own language and that someone cares for what she had to say and that her opinion actually matters. This is why it's so important to provide these opportunities for our cold consumers and clients as well. Just have a look. How nicely dressed, because for them, this was a big thing. They felt included, they felt invited. This was something special because what they had to say mattered to us, and they knew that. So it was a beautiful event. And I encourage you to do many events as such, and I'm sure that your clients will appreciate. They will benefit from a better service, and you can identify ways directly from clients how you can improve a particular service or enhance it. Other considerations here is that we must learn about the client. When we work with culturally and linguistically diverse people, we must learn about them, about their language and culture prior we make the initial contact, because that's going to help us to understand who they are and how to work better with them. Demonstrate to the clients that we understand them with doing all this. Learn few words about in the client's language. Greet them at the door in their own language, because don't forget, regardless how good your service is, when you knock on someone's door to offer support, at that initial point, you're still a stranger to them. And a good hello in their own language will make such a big difference to them. And it will open the door and already start working on establishing that trust, because providing service to culturally and linguistically diverse people must be based on trust. Tell your clients what you know about their culture. You may have been on a trip to their own country of birth, or you know someone who has been there. Tell them a city that you know. Like that all opens a whole conversation where you can establish better trust and then talk about support services and then providing feedback. And active listening and showing curiosity as well, and be open-minded when you communicate with these people as well, and talk about food. Food brings people together. We all like sharing recipes. We all like different international cuisine. Melbourne is a very, very good place for this kind of conversations as well. Plenty of restaurants, so diverse, different types of food. Organize a multicultural lunch. Food brings people together. Always carry that with you when you work with cult communities. It's a good starter when you start a conversation with them. So write down your question. I will be still here, more than happy to have a chat if you have any question in regards to the presentation that I have delivered today. And I really hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much. And now we will go to Lisa.
Thank you, Sanisha, so much for your expertise in this topic and the amount of work that you've done on the ground in working directly with older people, their families and carers and community development. And your experiences are valued and recognised, because you work every day with people from diverse cultural backgrounds, and it's a really great privilege to be able to share your knowledge, to hear from you, and to share your knowledge with the sector. So we encourage any feedback in the Q&A section that Nikki Rittinghausen will be managing a bit later on from the centre. Now, my name is Lisa Tribuzio, and I'm the manager of the Centre for Cultural Diversity and Ageing, and it's with excitement now that we get to show you a new resource, and it's called You Can Ask What You Need from Aged Care Services Consumer Voice Film, and it is a resource for the sector to share with their communities, with their diverse communities. The aim of the short video is to encourage older people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds to ask for what they need from aged care services. It is produced by the Centre for Cultural Diversity and Ageing and Red Hat Films, with support from Australian Multicultural Community Services and Elder Rights Advocacy. The film, the process that led up to the film was a engagement with older people from diverse cultural backgrounds, facilitated and supported by Australian Multicultural Community Services, with support from Sanisha, in getting the older people into a space and asking them what they think about the aged care system around giving feedback. Do they know how to give feedback to an aged care service? Do they know how to give feedback to the government? And what we found was that a lot of the people felt under-consulted and not really heard in the wider aged care space. And they didn't really know how to make a complaint or give feedback or make a compliment to an aged care service. So they felt almost as if they'd never been consulted with before. And so, of course, that was just one focus group. However, from that focus group, we developed a short resource to help older people know their rights in giving feedback to aged care services. And the video has been translated into 16 languages, including English, for communities to access. And it is available on the Centre for Cultural Diversity and Ageing's YouTube channel. So without further ado now, we're going to show you the film. It goes for 4.5 minutes, and hopefully you enjoy it. Thank you.
أود أن تفهم العاملة التي تأتي إلى منزلي ما هو مهم بالنسبة لي.
क्या सामाजिक सहायता समूह से मैं पूछ सकती हूँ किस प्रकार का मुझे भोजन चाहिए?
म हरेक मङ्गलबार मन्दिर जान्छु के मेरो श्रीमतीको व्यक्तिगत हेरचाहकर्ता मङ्गलबार आउन सक्छ?
去社团找我的朋友对我来讲是很重要的，你能帮我吗？
هل يمكنني الحصول على مترجم؟
हामीले तपाईहरुको यो वृद्ध हेरचाह घर मेरो श्रीमतीको लागि चुन्यौं भने के हामीले हाम्रो चाडबाड यहाँ मनाउन पाइन्छ अनि साथै खानेकुरा ल्याउन पाइन्छ?
All of those questions are really important. People using aged care services have the right to care and services that make them feel respected and heard. So when you and your family speak to aged care services, it's really important to let them know what your individual needs and wishes are. It's also important to let them know when your wishes, your needs, or your rights are not being met.
Služba kaže da ja ne mogu imati tepelja. Kako ja mogu podnijeti žalbu?
我在这里很孤独，因为大家都在说英语。我想看中文电视频道，不知道去问谁呀。
सामाजिक सहायता समूह उस प्रकार का भोजन परोसना भूल जाते हैं जिसका सेवन मैं कर सकती हूँ। मैं उन्हें कैसे बताऊँ कि मैं ये उनका भोजन नहीं खा सकती?
म मन्दिर जाँदा तपाईले पठाउनु भएको मेरो श्रीमतीको हेरचाहकर्ताले हाम्रो भाषा बोल्दैन। म घर पुग्दा मेरो श्रीमती साह्रै दुखी थिइन् किनभने हेरचाहकर्ताले उहाँले बोलेको बुझ्न सकेनन्।
You and your family have the right to complain or to give feedback to your aged care provider. You can do this in person, on the phone, or in writing. You can ask for an interpreter if you like in your preferred language. The aged care provider must keep your complaint private if you ask them to do so. On the other hand, if you are happy with the service provided, it is good to give the aged care provider a compliment.
很高兴在社团里能见到我的朋友，感谢你们把我送来这里。
Hvala što ste mi organizirali Hrvatski radio program. Osjećam se sretno.
जो भोजन मुझे पसंद है उसको प्रदान करने के लिए बहुत-बहुत धन्यवाद।
إن العاملة التي تأتي إلي وتساعدني لطيفة جدا وأشعر أنها تحترمني.
You can ask for what is important to you from aged care services. You can make a complaint or give them a compliment about their services. Aged care services must provide you information in a way that you understand. Aged care services must answer your questions in a way that you can understand. you can ask for what you need from an aged care service.
Everyone for your attention in watching that resource. And I guess it was very, sort of important to really simplify the message of feedback and help older people know just that they have a right to do so. It will be translated into 15 languages as mentioned, so and they're all available on our YouTube channel for you to share to communities or even within your own organisations, or anyone within your own organisations that's working directly with diverse communities to show the resource and to share the resource. So we're really happy to collaborate with Elder Rights Advocacy on that film, and of course Red Hat Films as well. So thank you very much. I'm now just going to give a brief overview and echo what Tanisha has talked about in relation to inclusive consumer feedback. Now, as I've said many times before, a survey does not, is not adequate in engaging older people who have multiple barriers to having a voice and participating in the aged care system. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about key considerations now. Thanks, Liliana. Which are mentioned in our practice guide. So when you go to our website under the service provider tab under practice guides, you'll see that we have 2 practice guides. One of them is culturally inclusive feedback, and the other one is effective co-design in working with older people from diverse cultural backgrounds. And both of them have tips and suggestions in how to adopt inclusive approaches to consumer feedback. So as you can see on the left-hand side here on this table, you'll see the number of different feedback methods that can be applied. So a survey is just one of the many methods that can be applied. Of course, there's community consultations, to which Tanisha has mentioned quite comprehensively in the importance of outreach and consultation and hearing the voices of older people and meeting them where they're at. Focus groups, to which the Centre for Cultural Diversity and Ageing adopted in its development of its consumer voice film that we just showed you, and in research projects that are out there in hearing the voices of older people, we can do focus groups. And then there's individual consumer consultation or feedback, because not everyone feels comfortable in sharing in groups because of shame and stigma and the risk of privacy and reputation and honour being at risk. So individual consumer consultation is also important. In terms of considerations, I don't want to repeat what Tanisha has gone through, but I'd like to consolidate what he's saying around the use, of course, of interpreters and bilingual staff. Now, when we did our focus group for the consumer voice film, we had about 6 or 7 interpreters in the space because we had many people from many different language groups involved, and we needed to stop and pause, be patient, and make sure everyone understood the message. Be mindful of literacy levels of the consumer considered in terms of the ability to read, write, and communicate, because we had people in the space that had dementia, early onset dementia. Providing opportunities for the approach of consumer feedback to be delivered in multiple methods and channels. So it could be online if people are confident with accessing digital technologies, but we know that majority of older people, as Tanisha mentioned, don't have confidence. So we need to approach people in person, by phone, having a trusted third party in writing, and via mail through the letterbox, just getting, mail sent to them, which is harder. I know that's hard. It's not practical in this day and age, but we're thinking of the consumer-centred care here, person-centred care. Telephone interviews. may cause concerns for consumers, such as who's calling me? Is this the government? Am I going to? It's scary. So it's really important to be mindful of cold calling or outreaching by telephone interviews when you haven't developed a trusting relationship with the person or their family. Just really simple techniques. If you're going to send a letter to their home, prepaid return address envelopes helps. It makes it easier for them to send it back. And be mindful of cultural factors. As Tanisha mentioned, the person's cultural background might influence their feedback experience, and this is detailed in our culturally inclusive feedback practice guide that is available on our website. So thank you very much for that. And of course, in residential care facilities, how are you engaging consumers in consumer and resident committees? So how are you making sure that your resident committees are inclusive as well? So there's quite a few things to consider. And I also wanted to highlight, before we go on to our next speaker, I also wanted to highlight a good practice example, as we always like to highlight at the centre, that was run by National Seniors Australia in collaboration with Australian Unity. Now, their research project was called Dealing with Diversity, Aged Care Services for New and Emerging Communities in August 2018. Now, I was really impressed with this research study because they conducted they outreach to communities and they got funding, and they outreach to communities to listen to them, to what their needs are. The purpose of the research was to identify the impacts of diversity on the ability of culturally and linguistically diverse people to access government services such as aged care, particularly when these services require a high level of digital literacy. Participants were asked about their needs, interests and barriers when accessing the aged care sector. The focus group was attended by 20 people representing the following communities: African Australians from the Horn of Africa, European Australians from various places of origin, Filipino Australians, Karen Australians from the Thai-Burma border, and Spanish-speaking Australians from Central and South America. The findings of the research suggested that, so the views of those communities included the following concerns in relation to the aged care sector and accessing the aged care services: the way in which language barriers affect their ability to access the aged care sector, the impact of time spent on refugee camps on English language proficiency, consent and privacy issues in accessing my aged care as a translator for family members, and the extra time it takes to access services when using translation services and interpreting services. The importance of their culture of the importance in their culture of aging in place and dying at home, the extra burdens on informal carers when the family member has dementia, the extreme resistance of the elderly to residential aged care, and the taboo nature of choosing to place a family member into a residential care home, and issues on residential care for whole people, such as adjusting to food. The difficulties associated with caring for family members at home, the burden of care is places on cold women, the loneliness of older cold people when their family members are at work or at school, and the isolation felt by cold informal carers, especially women. The difficulties associated with caring for people with dementia and the anxiety of leaving them at home alone. And the importance of transport services, not knowing where to get information, and digital issues, just to name a few. And there's quite a few really important findings here. So we've just shared the report in the chat, and we'll also, if you need a copy of that report, let us know, because it's got some really valuable information dealing with diversity. So just thought I'd mention that as a good practice story. So thank you everyone for your attention, and over now to Biljana.
Now, I'd like to welcome and introduce Yuki Simmons, our special presenter. She comes from the Parliament of Victoria, and I would like to say a few words about her work. She has worked in numerous roles in Victorian public service over the past 20 years, and she has managed various Victorian parliamentary committees relating to the areas of law reform, social policy, road safety, and economic development, as well as now currently working and manages the Legislative Assembly's Legal and Social Issues Committee. She has extensive policy and advocacy experience and is passionate about driving social change. So welcome, Yuki.
My name is Yuki Simmons, and I'm the Committee Manager of the Legal and Social Issues Committee at Parliament of Victoria. Today, I'm going to be talking about our current inquiry into older Victorians from migrant and refugee backgrounds. But before I begin, I would really just like to acknowledge and pay my respect to the traditional owners of the land we are meeting on today, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also really want to thank the Centre for Cultural Diversity and Ageing for inviting me to speak today. It's such an important topic, and I've actually already learnt so much already. I kind of wish I had attended this webinar before we started this inquiry. Before I begin, I just want to give a really quick overview of parliamentary committees. They are a key component of our Westminster system in Australia. So committees exist in all jurisdictions, including at the federal level. Obviously, we're based in Victoria here. So parliamentary committees comprise members of parliament from different political parties, and they come together to work on public policy issues and to do government oversight. And this is often through inquiries, and like the one that I'll be speaking to today. So the key functions of parliamentary committees are to investigate specific issues and to make recommendations to the government, which are reported to the parliament. We take evidence from experts and from the community, and we provide opportunities for community participation in the work of the parliament. And this is one of the key components of parliamentary committees, and a key component, I suppose, of our democratic system. There are multiple stages of an inquiry, which are listed here, and I'll briefly go through them just so you understand the type of work that we do and how an inquiry works. So the first stage of inquiry is when we receive the terms of reference, or this is like the instructions and really outlines the scope of the inquiry. It also usually contains a deadline for when we need to report back to the Parliament. And after we receive the terms of reference, the committee then advertises for submissions, and we contact people with expertise and specialist knowledge. And this is going to be the main area that I'll be discussing today. Once we've received submissions, we then go through a process where we hold public hearings, and that's where we take evidence from individuals, academics, experts, government agencies, and hear more about what their views are on the terms of reference. We then go through the period where we do our own research and also collate all the evidence that we've received in submissions and public hearings, and also do a lot of desktop-based research, journal articles, all that type of thing. And we then collate it together into a report. So the Secretariat, which I manage, we will then write the report for the committee. And the committee takes into account all the evidence and the research, and then meets in private to consider and reach decisions on key recommendations that are made to the government. The committee has to vote to agree on the final recommendations. It's kind of a similar process to say what would happen in the actual chamber of parliament when agreeing on a piece of legislation or a bill. Very similar for a committee report. And once that's done, the report's then tabled in Parliament, and it's made public. And then the government then has 6 months to respond to those recommendations. And what we're looking for is whether the government's actually going to implement and support those recommendations or not. So this is the Legal and Social Issues Committee. This is the committee that I work for. It has 4 government members and 3 opposition members. Natalie Solomon is the chair of the committee, and she's the member for St Albans. And her role as the committee chair is just to ensure the smooth operations of the committee during the inquiries. It can be a political process, given that we do have parties working together, but mostly they try to work together as much as possible and reach consensus on the recommendations to the Victorian government. So then moving to the inquiry that I'm discussing today, this is the terms of reference that the committee received from the Legislative Assembly in August of this year. As you can see, it's fairly detailed. The Assembly asked the committee to consider the needs of older Victorians from migrant and refugee backgrounds and to look at various things, but not limited to, but you'll see there's actually quite a few. So we've got 3 key components. The first being the adequacy of services for older Victorians from migrant and refugee backgrounds. Then we've also got a number of unique challenges that are faced by this cohort, including social isolation, civic participation, digital literacy, elder abuse, and access to culturally appropriate and home care services. In doing some of the background research, the Secretariat, we've actually identified some other challenges I think that we will definitely be exploring, including mental health issues and also dementia. And I think that as we take more and more evidence, other challenges will be identified from experts and individuals themselves. The last component is ideas to advance the physical and mental health and wellbeing of Victoria's multicultural seniors, including cultural best practices. So we received this terms of reference in August this year, and we have been asked to report by February next year, which I think is actually impossible. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind a break after the last 18 months over Christmas. But aside from that, I think that we will actually be seeking an extension to the reporting date, and we'll look to table our final report in May or June of next year. So the first thing we do when we start an inquiry is we identify who the key stakeholders are. And so here I have a list of the stakeholders that we've identified specifically for this inquiry. And obviously the priority groups are those first two. So older Victorians from culturally diverse backgrounds and their caregivers and families. We've also got multicultural and multi-faith community groups, government departments, local councils, social service agencies, peak bodies, advocacy organisations, aged care facilities, and also academic and research centres. So as I mentioned, our priority group is really to hear as much as possible from individuals with lived experience, which in this case are older Victorians from culturally diverse backgrounds. But Parliament as a whole, as an institution, we understand that it can be really challenging to engage with people from these backgrounds in parliamentary inquiries. And that's for various reasons, many of which are actually the responsibility of the Parliament to address. But these include language barriers, cultural differences, limited awareness and understanding about political processes in Australia, and possible distrust as well, given that a lot of people from culturally diverse backgrounds have come from, places of conflict before they arrived in Australia. And also, Parliament is an overly formal institution, and some of our processes, like making a submission or attending a public hearing with members of Parliament, can be perceived as overly formal. So that's something that we want to break down quite a little bit for this inquiry. And when we were developing the engagement strategy, we were really aware that of the need for our strategies to actually improve the awareness of the work of committees among different groups, and also to build a greater understanding and trust as well between the committee and individuals in these communities. So given those challenges that I identified, the Secretariat and the committee were really keen to actually undertake some preliminary consultations with key groups as part of the development of the plan. So we spoke to a number of different groups, including the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria, the Victorian Refugee Health Network, the Principal Policy Advisor to the Commissioner for Senior Victorians, and the Centre for Cultural Diversity in Ageing. And we heard a lot of different factors about, that we need to be mindful of, many of which have been discussed today. And obviously the most important is the need for targeted engagement methods and outreach through trusted community leaders. On the other hand, we also heard that community leaders are really tired, especially given what's with COVID and all the great work that they've had to do over the last 18 months. We also need to ensure that inquiry participants can provide input in a culturally safe way, and that it's really important that we as parliamentary staff explain parliamentary processes and also reassure people that they will be protected when they're making a submission or providing evidence in another way. We also talked about the challenges of engaging with this audience, and, I think one of them at the moment is engagement fatigue, that there has been so much communication around COVID-19, around the restrictions and also vaccinations. So that's something that we need to be really mindful of. And I think obviously there's a lot of confusion, and rightly so, between the idea of government and Parliament. So we're actually not government, we're Parliament, and people don't always understand that. So we have to be really clear in some of our communications around the inquiry. So in terms of the engagement strategy that we developed, it's got various components to it. And the first two that we've got here are more traditional ways that we engage with stakeholders through inquiries. The first being a stakeholder mail out. For this inquiry, we had a stakeholder list of over 500 organisations and individuals. And this is where we write to them directly from the committee chair, and we invite them to make a submission to address the terms of reference. And we also do other traditional promotion like, your media release, we do various social media posts, and we also advertise monthly in the Age newspaper. In terms of our targeted promotion, this is specifically to engage with individuals and older Victorians from culturally diverse communities. We developed an inquiry brochure and an inquiry poster, which we had translated into 20 languages. And I'll just skip to the next couple of slides just to show you what they look like. So we actually developed them in Parliament. We're really lucky to have a great comms team. And we thought that we'd actually put a positive spin on what we were wanting to hear back from people. So that's why we use the tagline of what would help you live happier. And we thought that having a more positive response and using positive language, we might encourage more constructive feedback and ensure that people feel that their suggestions will be listened to. Also, this kind of the notion around, what would help you live happier and the positive connotations that has behind it. We thought that might address some of the barriers that some people might have around engaging with Parliament or a government program, in terms of many of which Sanisha discussed before, in terms of, fear of looking like they're making a complaint and they might lose a service. So we just wanted people to tell us what's going to make your life happier. So this is the poster that we developed, which we had translated into 20 languages. And then we also had the brochure. So this provides a little bit more detail about some of the information that we really like to hear from people about. And we had some really kind of simplified questions in it. So, what are some of the everyday challenges for you and your parents or your grandparents? Do you feel safe in your community? Do you know where to find support? How can services be improved? Do you have access to and know how to use a computer? And what do you do to stay socially and physically and mentally active? And then we've also got information about how you make the submission, which I'll go back to and explain a little bit more. So they're the two resources that we developed. We also established or developed an Easy English Guide, which is a document that's written in plain English and uses infographics to explain the role of the committee, the purpose of the inquiry, and also how to make a submission. All of these resources are on our website, and we've also asked key groups and local councils to help us distribute them, and we can make hard copies available on request, and we're happy to send out to everybody and anybody. And we'll also be promoting the inquiry on community radio in various languages, and the purpose of these overall targeted promotion is really to promote the inquiry, to raise awareness of parliamentary committees and also to encourage people to participate. So they're the resources that we've developed, and we're currently going through the process of getting them out and about and really advertising them. In terms of the different ways that people can actually participate in the inquiry, this is something that we were also really mindful of, that we need to be really flexible to ensure that people do feel comfortable making a submission or just wanting to engage in the process overall. So we've developed an online survey, which we've had translated into 10 languages. We've also promoted it that we're happy to make this a hard copy survey, and we can print out and mail directly to individuals. We're suggesting that people can make an audio, a video or a written submission, and that this can actually be provided in people's preferred language, and then we'll actually have it translated into English. And it's actually interesting to see that we've already received quite a few submissions in different languages. So it's really great to actually see people respond positively to our strategies. We're also going to be holding a number of roundtable discussions, which we'll organise with peak groups and obviously have interpreters available. And we're probably aiming to do that early next year. we obviously have to be mindful of COVID-19 and making sure that people feel comfortable actually meeting in person, which can be really tricky, but we'll obviously be very mindful of that. And if not, we can do online stuff. But maybe we have to even think about some other strategies, given that, you know, there are limited levels of digital literacy in some communities. But with various resources to promote the inquiry and options for making a submission, we really hope that we can increase the amount of first-hand evidence that we receive from older Victorians from culturally diverse communities. We really think that that's essential to enhancing the overall relevance of the committee's recommendations and findings to the Victorian government. That's kind of the end of the presentation. If you want to know more, these are all the ways that you can find out more information. Please feel free to email us directly or give us a call. If you want to sign up for news alerts, then please go through these avenues, and please feel free to promote the inquiry yourself, or make a submission if you think that's relevant as well. Thank you.
My name is Nikolaus Rettinghausen. I'm the Senior Advisor and Project Officer of the Center for Cultural Diversity in Aging. And now is your opportunity to ask any questions. The first question, in terms of, I remember from the presentation that Sinisha mentioned, there's a lot of issue around trust. And you also mentioned digital literacy is an issue. So I just wanted to ask the presenters, in terms of targeted support to empower multicultural seniors to provide feedback, what's really important? What are effective methods considering the issues of trust and considering the issues of digital literacy? Maybe I'll start with Sinisha, if you want to bit explore on the trust issue.
We have to understand that particularly CULT communities 65 and over who migrated to Australia lived through some sort of traumatic or had some sort of traumatic experience through that or through a different life events. I gave an example with the European migrants following up Second World War, but also people coming from repressive regime, socialism, communism, people coming from the Middle Eastern countries experiencing repressive regimes as well. So when people come here, they do carry with them that particular experience, and then the issue of trust comes. And then the issue with settlement, establishing themselves in a new community, communicating with different and diverse people in different languages as well. So all this adds to those layers and kind of puts on the agenda the issue of trust, or who are you? Why should I trust you? What if I say something and then you dealing with the government, especially if a government is mentioned? Like with my aged care, for example, it's a government call center. In my experience, when we need to prepare seniors when we tell them that they will need to deal with the government call center, because this may affect what they have to say and their willingness to have a say and communicate with this particular agency. So all these issues in relations to trust can be tackled if we communicate effectively with CULT communities in a way in line with their language and culture, and considering their story, their life experiences and their migration journey as well. So plenty of tips that we can take from the presentations as well. Hello in their own language when you start communicating with them. You must learn something about them, the country of origin. So all this opens a door and makes them feel comfortable and builds the trust between the provider and the actual client from a culturally and linguistically diverse background, and helps the client to channelize a particular feedback and encourages them to do so. In regards to digital literacy, this approach needs to be targeted to a particular group called group, because we do know that some particular cultural and linguistically diverse groups, for example, coming from Southeast Asia, may have already some decent level of knowledge and experience in regards to technology. But that may not be necessarily the case with the 65 plus coming from Europe or Africa. So this approach also needs to be targeted so we know who do we support and how we support them. So knowing the numbers, knowing the communities, knowing the clients is essential. And service providers also must understand that it's a win-win situation. It's not just that the client we are empowering and they have a benefit of providing a feedback, it's their right to do so, but the benefit for the organization, the government agency, or any stakeholder involved in the service provision is that they can learn a lot from these people. They can take a lot from these people, and that can lead to innovation, better service delivery, and achieving a greater goals for the organization and the client themselves.
Thank you, Sinish. I think it's really a good example of community engagement and what you've done in Australian multicultural communities. And I would like to ask maybe Lisa, in terms of consistent community feedback, what do you think is important to ensure that there's consistent community feedback within an organization when working with diverse clients?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Nikki. Thank you for that, whoever asked that question, because it's about not just having, it's not just a nice thing to do, and that there's a particular worker that decided to think about going out to the community. It's about having it incorporated within the policies and procedures of the organisation, that when it comes to consumer participation, customer experience or consumer feedback loops, that they need to have a clear policy that adopts a diversity lens to consumer participation and feedback. And so if you go to, say, one of our resources, which I mentioned before, you can see that there's a number of different ways that you can get the feedback. So how does that policy reflect the different methods of engagement? Another thing is a consumer register. So how do you have diversity represented within a consumer register, consumer voice within your organisation? And the Centre for Cultural Diversity and Ageing has supported providers to diversify their consumer participation registers, and we can support you with that process. So we always encourage organisations to embed inclusive feedback within their policies and procedures. And of course, they can refer to the inclusive service standards. We have a tip sheet that highlights different suggestions and topics and sort of strategies in incorporating and developing a policy within your organisation.
We are pretty much aware that this inquiry, what's happening in Victoria on all the people from multicultural and refugee backgrounds, is pretty unique, and we're not aware of anything else happening in any other state focusing specifically on seniors. So my question is there anything that we can do to encourage maybe other states to look into that as well? And maybe while Yuki is just I can just see Yuki turning on the camera, if you could tell us a little bit maybe as well, with what sort of organizations you have sort of worked with in terms of your roundtable discussions, how far have you progressed at, sort of what sort of face-to-face elements do you have? And I guess the other thing would be interesting, because it's pretty unique, where did you get the learnings from? So because it's a very pioneering project. So how did you start doing all these things? Yeah, thank you.
No worries. So in terms of, I suppose, how we actually went about engaging with different groups for this inquiry, we actually did an inquiry at the beginning of Parliament, so in 2019, into early childhood engagement of culturally diverse communities. So this is actually the second inquiry that we've done in this space, but I think we kind of took some learnings from that and then applied it to this inquiry. I think we were a bit naive in terms of how we could engage with communities in the first inquiry. And while we had different resources, and we actually did a video, which we did it in 4 different community languages, because we understood that certain communities have very limited levels of literacy, but we realised that we can't do videos during COVID. So that's why we haven't done the videos. But even though we did different methods, we kind of had limited engagement with culturally diverse communities. So we thought we have to kind of go a step further this time and actually have to speak to those key groups before we even try to develop an engagement strategy. So that's why we kind of reached out to different places. I think also Parliament of Victoria is a little bit more progressive than other parliaments and is trying to engage with different communities. So, you know, we are definitely taking our learnings from our comms team and they've actually created different groups that they have regular communications with around inquiries and the work of Parliament and how we can do outreach to different communities. So that's kind of where I've taken my learnings from. In terms of the roundtables, where it's early days at this stage, we're still just kind of getting all those materials out there. But when we did a big mail out and just to let people know what resources we have and how people can engage with the inquiry. We've had a lot of feedback from different groups saying to us, we'd really like to help you host a roundtable discussion. So I took a call recently from a woman who organises a seniors club, an Afghan seniors club in Dandenong, and she's really keen for us to go to Dandenong next year and hold a roundtable discussion with them. So, you know, I'm kind of getting all those. So it's kind of like it's being driven by the different groups, and we'll just respond, and we're kind of just making ourselves available to everything and anything. So, you know, I'm like, without the members of the committee even knowing, they're going to be very busy come January, February next year. But this inquiry, I think, I mean, in terms of what other parliaments can do around Australia, this inquiry came from the government, so it was a government-initiated inquiry. But I probably imagine there would have been a bit of pressure from different groups, maybe say from the Victorian Multicultural Commission, I'm guessing. We're often not privy as to where or why the inquiry was instigated in the first place. But we do note that it's an election year next year, so hopefully we can, you know, some of our recommendations can actually influence those election commitments.
Danielle is asking if you could give us a short explanation for older people, what's the difference between parliament and government, and that maybe people can use to explain it in a simple way to people.
Yeah, sure. So Parliament is obviously the institution that holds all political parties. So as you'll know, we've got the Liberal Party, we've got the Labor Party, we have the National Party, and we also have a number of independents and smaller parties. So that is the Parliament. So the Parliament is all those political parties and all those members of Parliament. The government is the government of the day that's been elected to govern the state or the country. So that's who is responsible for policy and departments and funding. So at the moment, the government is a Labor government at the state level. At the federal level, it's a Liberal government, and they've been elected to govern for that period. So 3 years Commonwealth or 4 years in Victoria. But the Parliament comprises all members of Parliament and all political parties.
I'd like to thank all the participants today for that very great contribution for this interesting topic. And I would like to discuss a little bit about our website. Our website is funded by the Department of Health, and the website itself, it's a program on its own, and we offer various services. On the main tab, you can find multilingual resources, good practice stories. We have the inclusive service standards that we developed, and of course the training and professional development page. We would also like to encourage you to sign up to our newsletter so you can get the latest news and updates from us. And I would like to discuss a bit of about our practice guide. We have a lot of topics that can be downloaded for training for your organization. Some of the topics that as you can see on the screen, are communication, risk management, spiritual support, and of course, today's topic, culturally inclusive feedback. These are free to download from our website. I'd like also to mention about the consumer feedback forms, which we have in 12 languages, translated in 12 languages, and this can be found under the multilingual resource page on our website, also free to download. Now I'm going to go over to Lisa so she can talk about the Inclusive Service Standard Portal.
Just thought I'd give you an overview of the Inclusive Service Standards portal, which you all now have access for free. It is an expensive resource, so we would like to be generous and give that to you in the sense that if you do register for the portal, you'll be able to navigate yourself around all the resources we've spoken about today, access to a self-assessment tool to see how inclusive your organisation is or the journey towards inclusive approaches. We have a reading room with good practice examples, and of course, you are all entitled to a 30-minute mentoring session with BNG, the online platform, to help you navigate the portal. So the portal was developed in 2020 in partnership with BNG to support service providers with operations, governance and compliance around reporting to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. And this particular portal has a diversity and inclusion lens, and it can generate reports for you around where you are on your inclusive practice journey. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about the portal. It has tip sheets and strategies for you to journey towards inclusive practice. In relation to inclusive consumer feedback, it does relate to Standard 6, as Tanisha mentioned. So there is a section on Standard 6 and how to approach this issue from an organisational-wide approach. So thank you very much for that. And the next slide we're going to talk about is, of course, our webinar recording. So this is the last of our 2021 webinar, and we're so excited to inform you that we've had over 1,000 registrations for these webinars in 2021. We've had 95% of consumer participation in the registration, and people that have participated, they were all happy with the topics. They are all now available on our website to embed within your learning management systems, and the PowerPoint presentations are available on our website for you to use. You can get access to the slides on the website in the next few weeks, so watch the space once they get uploaded. They are all available except applying a diversity lens to consumer-centred care. That one is not available, but the rest are available. So, of course, embed them into your learning management systems, use them freely, they're free, and let us know if you'd like to do that for sustainability. Next slide. Yes, and the 2022 webinar series is going to happen, and we've got 5 topics. So these are the topics and these are the dates, and they will all be available you can register anyone from your organisation in December, and they are available on our website. So we've got inclusive leadership, diversity strategies within the aged care sector, so positive stories and examples of diversity plans and inclusion policies from a range of different aged care providers. Applying a diversity lens to end-of-life care, which is a really interesting topic around the ways in which end-of-life care needs to be dealt with in a sensitive way according to people's ideologies and spiritual framework. And we've got some really cool community leaders there. Conscious inclusion, moving on from unconscious bias, will be presented with amazing subject matter expert, which we're really excited to let you know in December, so watch the space. And then managing equal and mutually beneficial partnerships with multicultural communities, again with some key community leaders there. So let us know if you need more information about those webinars. They're all for free as well.
Now, I'd just like to talk a little bit about our Communities of Practice series. The Diversity Communities of Practice series offers aged care providers diversity coaching and mentoring to support their inclusive practice journey. The Diversity series offers aged care providers the opportunity to learn from their peers and get support in understanding the Inclusive Service Standards portal and what they offer, and also aims to share learnings relating to diversity and inclusion for their consumers. The Diversity Communities of Practice is running quarterly for 2 hours, and it will be conducted online. Each organization can register 2 leaders from their organization to attend the Communities of Practice. The meetings will be held online, and to register, just go under our training tab on our website. Also, I'd like to mention and thank our partners for in Cultural the Appropriate Care PCAC program. Again, the Center for Cultural Diversity in Aging is funded through the Department of Health PCAC program, and the PCAC Alliance is aiming to be a voice of and discussion conduit into information, so educate providers and offers training and resources to inform the aged and community care services. Their website is pcagalliance.org, and you can also get more support on their website, and how to reach individual state and territories through their website. And lastly, I would like to thank everyone who participated on our webinar today, and everyone that contributed, and make sure you go to the website, and if you have any queries, do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you so much.